First, if there is one area the coalition's really starting to differentiate itself from Labor, that is energy, with a renewed push today for nuclear power to be on the agenda. We've seen how effective the coalition can be in opposition when they attack Labor's flawed energy promises as an economic issue. In the end, it was this approach that sunk the Gillard-era carbon tax. News today that Peter Dutton looks set to announce a suite of practical energy policies before the federal budget in May are encouraging, including planning for small modular reactors. Naturally, though, Labor doesn't even want to have this debate, with the Prime Minister today echoing that hapless line from Chris Bowen that it doesn't stack up.
There's no one saying that, hey, we want to invest in this. No one.
Because there's a rule that says you can't.
No, that's because it
waste of a time putting together a business case, wouldn't it? No, but why do you need a rule if the business case doesn't stack up to ban it?
Because it doesn't stack up.
Well, Will Gooding is absolutely right there. I mean, it doesn't stack up because it's not allowed to stack up. It's banned in Australia. But nuclear power is stacking up in 33 other countries, most of them, of course, doing it without uranium. Joining me now to discuss this, Shadow Climate and Energy Minister Ted O'Brien. Well, Ted, that line from the Prime Minister that it doesn't stack up, that he's never seen a business case, that people aren't, banging on his door to invest in nuclear, well, when it's banned, that's pretty obvious, isn't it?
Peter, it is obvious, and if he is so confident, then he should just lift the moratorium and see what the market does. But he's afraid of doing that. I mean, this is the same Prime Minister who went to the Australian people promising a $275 reduction in their power bills. He's refused to have a discussion on nuclear energy, and then, boom, now he's an expert trying to lecture Australians on whether or not it economically stacks up. I don't think anyone takes him seriously, to be honest with you.
And of course, his $275 power drop, he now tries to wiggle away from it because he said, we've been hit with inflation, we've been hit with the Ukraine war. Well, he made all of these commitments long after Russia crossed the border into Ukraine. We've got 33 other countries, as I said, around the world doing what we're talking about doing here in Australia. This is, I think, what's cutting through in all these opinion polls where Australians say, we at least want to have a look at this.
And Peter, you're right. There are 33 economies right now with nuclear energy, and they want more. And then there are another 50 countries that are looking at introducing nuclear energy for the first time. And we're talking about the Prime Minister. So the Prime Minister is hosting ASEAN nations in Australia this week. Well, I tell you what, Singapore, Vietnam, the Philippines, Cambodia, Laos, they're all looking at the possibility of introducing nuclear energy. I mean, the Philippines, we had President Marcos address Parliament only last week. They, right now, are drafting legislation to introduce nuclear energy. So I look forward to our Prime Minister sitting around the table at ASEAN trying to lecture these world leaders on why somehow they got their economics wrong. These countries, like so many around the world, are introducing nuclear energy or wanting to do so because it gets prices down. It allows the lights to stay on and you can decarbonise your grid. It works in base load, but it can also ramp up and ramp down to load follow renewables. But for some reason, Labor refuses to have a sensible conversation in this country.
Now, I know you're not going to announce a policy here tonight. You're probably not going to tell me exactly when you're going to put it on the table. But, I mean, are we going to see something this year? There's talk today in the media that it'll be around the May budget. And specifically, Ted, are we going to see a policy where you are open about what type of technology we're looking at for Australia? Are you open about where you might put some of these small modular reactors, what the benefits might be? Because we know Labor and the left, the Greens in particular, they're going to run a scare campaign. But I always think with this stuff, the sooner you get it out, the sooner you confront that scare campaign and debate it, don't just leave it for the actual 6-week election campaign, the better chance you have to knock it off. So what's your broader strategy?
Just as you mentioned there, Peter, I mean, it's that old adage, isn't it? You can't fatten the pig on market day. You need to make sure that you are out there and being absolutely transparent. And again, it's one of the lessons I've learned from overseas, and it shouldn't just apply to nuclear energy, it should apply to wind farms, gas plants, solar farms. You have to be open and honest with the community. Otherwise, especially Australians, they'll sniff you out and they'll come after you, and they should, if you hide things. So we have been doing a lot of the heavy lifting, and we will be announcing a policy in due course that shall be open about all the things you mentioned there, because unless we are open and transparent with the Australian people, we can't seriously be asking for their support. I just wish the other side of politics would be as open and transparent about their plans for their rollout of 82% renewables by 2030.
Look, and I just want to say to my viewers, Ted and I caught up at ARC in London last year, and we had a long discussion about energy policy, and I was utterly impressed about how much work you've been doing since the moment you've got this portfolio. So I hope it all finds a landing point, that it gets through shadow cabinet. But I must say, Ted, I'm really impressed, because that's the only way you win, is to have fair income policies on the table to take on an incumbent government. Just before we go, the Thai leader, or Thai government Prime Minister today, says is pretty concerned about Labor's new car emissions standards. I mean, I think they're basically a tax on SUVs and pickup trucks and utes in this country. But he, I think, is looking at it as an imposition of a new tax on their exports into Australia. How concerned were you to read this?
Peter, I was concerned because, admittedly, I've been very focused on the impact of this new car tax on everyday Australians and a lot of small businesses who are the dealers. But reading today, the penny dropped absolutely the impact on some of our closest trading partners. Again, it just demonstrates why those from the left that play big government ultimately create a sovereign risk for Australia. This will be an enormous imposition to the Thai manufacturers, also the Japanese, and that is why we are seeing Australia's reputation across a whole bunch of areas. We saw it, a lot through gas recently. Now we're seeing it through the auto industry. Big government, big interventions, higher taxes equals sovereign risk. Australia's reputation goes down.